Hello and welcome to Coding Coffee. What will we do in this new sub-series of critical coffee consideration? Well, we'll teach you how to program. And why is that important to become critical coffee consumers? In my personal case, for this channel, I really just need a web app. But it's just good to actually know how the web works, how data is collected, what you can do with that data, how you can be misled at some point maybe by some data. But for me, at this point, it became a pressing issue because I've been keeping all my notes in this little notebook here. I actually started the 10th of May 2021, I guess. First just, consuming coffee, registering which coffee, how I was grinding it, and then getting some taste notes also there. And then later when I started roasting with the popcorn popper, and now just recently with the Genie Cafe. But I actually thought I lost my little book here, so that really became a pressing point. I can't keep relying on this to save all my data. I want to have it kind of centralized. When I started writing everything down, I thought, well, at some point I'll make some nice graphs, see some kind of trends. But then you just, writing it down, and then to do any further kind of analysis, I would have to type in everything into a database anyway before I start analyzing that. So why bother doing this extra effort if it's so easy to actually start with a website? And how are we going to do that? Because I really encourage you to follow along, start your own web server. And we'll do this with the Python language, which I personally find is a very easy language to get started with. Of course, we'll also have some HTML, CSS, markup languages to get everything visually working on the website, and then at some point maybe also some JavaScript, but everything just step by step. This first episode is just to get started, just to have something up running out there on the web. And there's this terrific service, pythonanywhere.com. Doesn't cost anything to get started. No having to provide your credit card or something like that for your free trial, and then not knowing what they'll actually do with that information. So you simply go to the pythonanywhere.com website. And then as it starts here, you can start running Python online in less than a minute. So this brings you to their plans and pricing. As I just said, there is a beginner free. To do that, you just, you create a beginner account. Maybe in the future, if you need some more capacity to run your database or website, you can start out with $5 a month. I haven't done this myself at this point, no need for it. A disclaimer, I have no affiliation at all with Python Anywhere. I was just Googling for a solution that allows me to get started this way, and this is where I end up. I am aware of Anaconda, which is a Python program packaging solution, one might say. I know I know that for many years. So this did give me some kind of extra trust in the organization behind Python Anywhere, but I'm not going to share anything private with them at this point. So to create a beginner account, you just click on the button there. You create your account, of course, username, email, and then you register. I won't go through all the steps here. I have done that before, so I will actually simply go to the login page, and then we'll actually put this a little bit in front here to give me some private space of logging in. There we go, logging in. All right, this brought me back to the... I'm a little bit confused, but I am actually logged in now. As you can see, you would not have this kind of a redirect if you're doing the registration from the get-go. I just wanted kind of to show you where you go to register as a first-time user. As I was already registered and I then logged in, the website got confused. So they have a little bug there that they might want to address. So you're at this point. You made an account on Python Anywhere. It means you can start programming. But wait a minute, maybe you think, I've never programmed anything at any point in my life. That is very unlikely. You might have at very least programmed a microwave or something to get your dish ready, or having used a calculator, just doing an addition of two numbers might be something you end up writing in a programming language. So don't worry, just give it a try. The Python Anywhere dashboard has several options. There's at the left, there's this consoles. This will give you an interface with the operating system that is running in the background, which is a Linux system. There's all the files that you might have created. You see, I already created a between two cracks file in the past, but to do it step by step, we'll actually be recreating this. Notebooks is a feature that, well, you need to upgrade your account to get access to that. You don't actually really need notebooks to start programming. It is basically a web page where you split up your code in several blocks, and each block might visualize a graph for you or something, or setting up some data for you. But you can do anything you would do in a notebook, just using either the console or writing files. So it's not something that you really need. What we do want to do is actually start out with a web app. We want to set up our web app. So we click open a web app. And at this point, we don't have any web apps. So we click add a new web app. Your web app's domain name, your free account already gives you a custom, a subdomain of pythonanywhere.com. In my case, that would be my Francis Peck username here. If you want to change that, you would have to upgrade. Of course, if your email is something more interesting, that would look maybe better. So again, you don't really need an upgrade to get started. You would already have an URL to go to have a look at your website without having spent any pennies. Otherwise, you know, so we're okay with this. So we're just going to click next, which is, yes, it's visible on the screen. So that's what we click. Okay, so you might start using any kind of programming language and writing all the code yourself, but it would mean reinventing the wheel literally at every line of code that you're making. So programming is all about making your life easier, not redoing things, automating things. So not redoing things. And that means you look for what we would then call either libraries or frameworks, which are not end programs made by other programmers, but pieces of very useful code packaged in a certain way that you then can reuse for your own projects. And so when we're building a web app here, we want to use a web framework, which is going to take care of a lot of the repeatable steps in having computers communicate between each other and then delivering a web page to you. Now there's several options. There's Django, the first one listed here. That's one I've worked a lot with in the past, and it kind of is a big framework in the sense of it kind of figures everything out for you. Everything you need, how you access your data, how you kind of make templates to have a starting point for displaying things, how you structure your code in the different files. It figures out everything for you. The third one here, Flask, is also one I have kind of experience with, and that's called a micro framework. So its starting point is kind of minimalistic, and then if you want to access data in a specific way, you kind of have to look for another library to connect to it and be able to do other kind of easy to repeat functionalities that programmers share between each other. For this kind of educational journey, I consider this micro framework more useful because out of the box there will be few code we need to initialize to already have something running, and then step by step in the next episodes we'll be adding other small libraries that help us out with things we need to do for our web app. So we'll select the Flask option here. There's Web2Py, Bottle, or a manual configuration. Will not make it any more difficult at this point. When you're programming, you're never the first one to do anything, and any kind of packages, libraries, frameworks that are out there, they all have version numbers. Bigger numbers usually mean more recent code. When you start out with something, usually you want to use the biggest number. In this case, that would be Python 3.10. So that's the most recent version of the Python programming language, together with Flask 2.1.2. This kind of description of the version is actually semantic versioning. The first number we call the major version, then you have a minor version, and then a patch. Actually, if you get used to using a certain major version like 2 or here the Python 3, any kind of upgrades you have to these smaller numbers would mean in theory, everything should still work the same. So what you've made in the past should still be compatible with higher numbers of these smaller ones. When the biggest number changes, you might have some trouble just switching to that, and that it's kind of a promise when the first number changes that they made things that are incompatible with how they ask you to work with their solution in the past. But you're just starting out. At this point, you're not really caring for that. Just think, if you're starting out with something, just go for the biggest number. Okay, here they kind of have you have a file path. Now, if you're used to working on Windows, this might look a little bit strange to you. If you're working with Linux, I'm quite sure you're already a programmer, so you're welcome to join this, but probably not going to pick up too much in these episodes. If you have a Mac computer, the file system works kind of in a similar way. So our user is Francis Peck, and the home directory is kind of where all the users are sitting. And so they propose having a directory, a folder called My Site, but we'll change this to between two cracks, and we'll then have flask_app. We'll leave that as it is. This is actually this file name that we saw earlier that was still kind of in their file cache, but I have deleted that to kind of restart and register it as an educational journey. So we'll click on next to have that created and quick started. So that just takes kind of a few seconds. Then we get a message on top, all done, your web app is now set up. The details are below. Reloading it is if you change anything to the website, but we still have to do that, of course. Having a free account, one important thing is, there's no such thing as a free lunch, of course. Well, there is in this case, but they want you to reiterate the fact that you're still using it. So you kind of have to just click, run until 3 months from today. You kind of have to activate that every 3 months so that they don't disable your website. But this is a very, very tiny effort to have a free web app out there that can store data for you. So this is you just have to keep track of that. I'm quite sure they'll send an email just before they otherwise would disable it. If you are a paying user, well, you don't need to bother with that. Let's have a look at our website. It's open on another tab. Will it show something? It does show something. It says hello from Flask. Flask being, of course, that micro framework for having a web application that we have chosen to work with. And so here you can already see this was our username. So if you register an account, this will now actually show your username. Now we want to actually do something different with it, of course. So we would go to files here on the top. Now we have the directory here between two cracks that we put in place there for the path, and we see the Flask app py. So now we can actually click this file, which is the kind of entry point for all the programming logic to generate a website or a web application. Now, maybe this is a good point to just reflect a second about what's just a web page and what might be a web application. A web page might just be something very static that someone has generated once, and it kind of sits in some place, and when somebody wants to see that, they get this kind of exact copy of that. Whereas a web application, you kind of assume there's an application in the background preparing those web pages. So you kind of expect more dynamic data being loaded in and then displayed to the user, which is, well, really what we want to do here is collect all our espresso or roasting data and then have a way of displaying that dynamically. And we don't know exactly at this moment, what coffees are we going to work with, what roasters are we going to work with. So that will all be kind of dynamically set in the future. Anyways, we have this kind of central file for the application. You just click it and it will open a file editor. So this is basically what's running our web application at the moment. Now, we said hello from Flask. Now let's just turn this into between two cracks. Let's give you a hello from between two cracks. We made a change, we save it. What you can see here is the app root. That's basically saying, if you have your basic URL, which in my case is francisbeck, pythonanywhere.com, well, the root is what comes after there. So the slash is just the starting point. Now we could have in the future /coffees and then showing a list of coffees, or /roasters showing a list of the roasters we have available. That's how you start to build up this kind of roots. If you're on any kind of website, Facebook, might bring you to a certain kind of post or a message. Everything kind of works with this roots. What we have here is within Python a function definition. Now, what is a function in programming? A function is a block of code you would like to repeat, and it might take some arguments. Now, we're lucky. For this first lesson tutorial, we don't need to explain what arguments are yet exactly. We can just have a function that doesn't take any arguments, and the only thing it does is it returns something. We understand, returning. You ask me a question, I return you an answer. You go to a specific route on a website because you want to get a certain type of information, and it will return you a certain kind of answer. And in this case, this is just returning a little bit of text. Now in programming lingo, we would call this a string because it's demarcated by the single quotes. And you could also, let's make this lesson a little bit more interesting and use double quotes. Now, if I would do this will break, but that's not a bad place to start. So I save that again. I know this is going to break. We'll ask it to reload, which is the one next to the menu. So we're actually reloading that. So it's turning around means it's actually reloading. Now it's done. We go back to our website. We want to refresh it. What's going to happen? Ooh, something went wrong. Something went wrong while trying to load this website. Please try again later. If it is your site, you should check your logs to determine what the problem is. Logs. Now, that's interesting, but I don't need to check any logs. I know exactly what I did wrong. I have a string here that's using one kind of demarcation symbol for the string and ends with another one. That's just not correct. So I now changed it to both double quotes. We'll save that. Okay. We'll reload that again. And hopefully in a second, I can now share with you the power of programming. Hello from between two cracks. That's how you start it. That's how you start programming. If you follow the steps along, You don't need to say hello from between two cracks. Hello from anything, any kind of message you want to display here. If you want to share your journey, you're welcome to put a link to your website in the comments below. You don't have to. It's just about, giving you something to follow, something to experiment with. There's no bad things to try programming unless you become an evil hacker. That's not what we want to do. I hope this first episode already gave you a bit of a taste of where we might be going with this course. This is, well, from a usability point of view, at this point this has no usability, but we've set up our environment. We'll start adding useful things in the next episode. Hope to see you there.